For the first time this season, Ole Miss didn't necessarily rise to the occasion at home. They ended up dropping the game to the Auburn Tigers 91-77. Let's overreact to it.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is the instant overreaction to the Auburn Tigers and the Ole Miss Rebels played in the SJVB Pavilion tonight. It's a situation, Ole Miss had plenty of opportunities to put this game away in the first half. Ole Miss was playing very, very well. They were hitting outside shots. They were defending the ball. It was going almost to script to the way you would want it to go. It went to halftime. I believe Auburn hit a three right before halftime to cut it to 9 points. And when Ole Miss came out in the second half, Auburn's intensity rose, and Ole Miss kind of, for the first time this season, did not rise to the occasion to go against that Auburn team, and it kind of snowballed on them. Auburn won the second half 56-33. You're not going to win many basketball games doing that. But at the end of the day, this was a bonus win. This was a game that Ole Miss could honestly have because of what they did at College Station. Now, this week coming up at South Carolina, at Kentucky, both of those are going to be real contests. But a 5-4 record at the turn after winning 3 SEC games last year, and now they're 18-4 overall. I think there's not a person out there that wouldn't take that, but it was concerning the way the second half won this game because it wasn't necessarily an Auburn thing. Auburn just raised the intensity and did what they do. Ole Miss started playing in the second half at home the way they were playing on the road. And that's a little bit concerning, but it's not a situation where, throw in the towel or anything like that. So we'll see exactly how that goes as well. Also, Ole Miss got a commitment in football from 2025, Cory Amos. He's a 4-star linebacker out of Louisiana. The junior day is already a success. I figure if there's several juniors that were at that basketball game, that atmosphere is probably going to at least put Ole Miss in a good shot to get a commitment as well. The atmosphere in that game was completely off the charts. It was amazing. And it is something unlike anything we've seen recently at Ole Miss basketball. Very proud about that. We'll talk about that in just a second when we start going through the chat as well. Matthew Morrell ended up with 18 points. Alan Flanagan had 20. Jamin Brakefield had 15. Musa Cisse had 12. Ole Miss was shorthanded. They did not have Jamarian Sharp. He did not play in this basketball game. And it just wasn't it was kind of an off night for Jalen Murray. It happens. Jalen Murray has made big shot after big shot after big shot for Ole Miss. Tonight, it just didn't necessarily work out for him. And Ole Miss needed Jalen Murray if they were going to pull off this game. They just absolutely could. This game was all opportunity, no risk. And if you followed Ole Miss basketball this season at all, you know what I'm talking about there. But all opportunity, no risk. That is pretty cool indeed. Willis says, hate that the kids didn't finish and kind of laid down, but they're exceeding expectations this year, so we can't be too mad. You are absolutely correct on that. This is still a really good basketball team. This basketball team, nobody thought going into it that Ole Miss was going to contend for the SEC and national championship. There are going to be people that want to win every game, and they react accordingly, and I understand all of that. But my thing is I tell people like it is. I've been saying all year, and you can go back and watch Locked On Ole Miss podcast all year where I said that 9-9 in the SEC should have been the goal. Ole Miss is 5-4. Ole Miss can go 4-5 throughout the rest of the season, end up with 22 or 23 wins and in the NCAA tournament. I mean, that is on the table for Ole Miss basketball in year one of Chris Beard. Now, the one thing that bothered me, okay, the one thing that bothered me in this game is for the first time we've seen all year, every time that they needed to rise to the occasion or do something like that to meet the intensity of the moment, Ole Miss has always been able to do it. Throughout this whole season, they've been able to do that. In the second half, it was readily apparent, almost from the beginning of the half, that there was an intensity gap between both of the teams. And Auburn has taken the personality of their coach. I like Bruce Pearl. I like their teams. I don't think this is a particularly good Auburn team. I realize that they've kind of boat raced Ole Miss in 3 out of 4 halves. I get that. But I'm talking about as nationally and in the SEC, I don't know if they're that team. I think it's a situation where you might see them lose on the first or second game of the NCAA tournament. So whenever intensity becomes the separating factor between two teams, I get a little concerned. And I think that's interesting to think of. Ole Miss has South Carolina Tuesday night. That's going to be a difficult game. That is. And then they have a road game at Rupp Arena at Kentucky. That's going to be a difficult game. There's a chance for like solid problems. If Ole Miss gets one of those games, it's an abject win. There's no doubt that it's a win. So we'll see exactly how that goes as well. It just looked like a different team in the second half. But against South Carolina and against Kentucky, you can still make this season whatever you want it to be, essentially. Everything's on the table for this team, and Ole Miss has not dropped a basketball game, with the exception of maybe LSU. That was not one that Ole Miss was expected as a possibility for losing, if that makes sense. I think this basketball team has a chance to be really good. I do. And I think they have a shot in South Carolina. They have a shot in Kentucky. And obviously they have 2 games against Missouri, which, my goodness, I saw the Missouri-Vanderbilt game today, and that was like a clinic in how not to play basketball. Vanderbilt ended up winning that game, but that's 2 games right there. So if Ole Miss sweeps both games against Missouri, that's 7 wins. Ole Miss needs 2 more wins out of South Carolina, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Georgia, Alabama, and I think somebody else. But if you do that and have that going, I genuinely think 9-9 is on the table for this team. And I think they can be pretty good, honestly. I think we'll see exactly how they go as the SEC season goes. Now, this cannot be a defining stretch for Ole Miss basketball. The loss to Auburn, if you lose to South Carolina at South Carolina, if you lose to Kentucky at Kentucky, that cannot be a defining stretch that affects you in home games against Missouri, South Carolina, Alabama. Those have to be a different type thing. And I think that this team is going to be mentally tough enough to where they can handle it. I do. I've seen this Ole Miss basketball team all year win close game after close game after close game. That's going to involve some mental toughness. But whenever this basketball team turns the ball over, they're rebounding. Like, they got shredded on the boards tonight. They just did. Auburn in the first half in that game, Ole Miss came out so jacked. And if it wasn't for offensive rebounding, if Ole Miss could have rebounded the basketball, that game could have been a 20-point game in the first half. They played exactly how they needed to play coming into the basketball game. It was the collapse and not raising the intensity level after the halftime that kind of bit them. And we'll see what happens. Like I said, Morrell 18, Brakefield 15, Flanagan 20. Musa Cisse had a season high with 12 points. Brandon Murray had 8. He kind of disappeared in the second half as well. We'll see exactly how that goes. Ole Miss played 9 players in this game. And if you look at it, Auburn outscored Ole Miss in the second half, 56-33. You're not going to win many basketball games doing that. Not going to win many basketball games doing that. Willis says Lane Kiffin didn't create an elite culture in 1 year. If we keep Beard, we're going to have 2 or not 3 of the top 10 major sports teams. Yeah, it's all good. Anybody that wants to sky is falling tonight, they don't know what they're talking about, honestly. Jerry Rice, I don't think it was that one, but deep team that is top 10 in all metrics, but yeah, not that good. They're not. They've dropped games to Mississippi State. They've dropped games to Alabama. They've dropped games they shouldn't lose. They don't lose at home, but you're not going to play the NCAA tournament in Neville Arena. This was your first quad 1 win of the entire season. But sure, you're top 10 in all metrics against not winning quad 1 games, period. John Michael Gunner says Chris Beard will get it done. Yes, he absolutely will. I have no doubts about that. Right now, not his dudes. This is probably the worst basketball team that Chris Beard's going to have. It's going to win probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 22, 23, 24 basketball games. And not a single person can complain about that. And we'll see how it goes against South Carolina. We have Shark Tank Live that night. I've asked Brad Logan to be on the show that night as well, and we will talk it up about what can happen with Ole Miss basketball. Now, the Lady Rebs have South Carolina tomorrow, and that's a big game for Coach Yo and the ladies, and we'll see exactly how that goes. It's a situation that it's going to be a difficult game. It's a sellout in South Carolina. It's a free shot. That's what it is. Go over there and try and get the win. And we'll see exactly what's up. Ole Miss got a commitment in their junior day today. We're going to talk about this Monday on the podcast as well. But Cory Amos, linebacker out of Louisiana, 4-star player, committed to Ole Miss. Big time pickup for Pete Golding's defense. We're going to bring that up and break that down a little bit Monday night. I know everybody's probably down on it, but honestly, it was a free shot tonight. You wanted to win the game. You were an underdog in the game. You did not win the game. You should have won the game. You did not win the game. It was a situation to where Mike White and Keith Carter, whenever those teams were playing teams like this, and that first half happened, when it got to 13, it got to 20. That's just what happened. When it got to 15, it got to 20. And that is the next step that Chris Beard needs to take this Ole Miss basketball program to. South Carolina game Tuesday night is going to be difficult. It just is. And we'll see exactly how that goes. But I have no doubt that it's going to be successful. I have no doubt that they're going to be really good teams moving forward. And I have no doubt that Chris Beard is going to be able to do things at Ole Miss basketball that they have not done. We've seen that. We've seen the atmospheres the last 2 games in Oxford, Mississippi. We've seen it. It's special. Absolutely special. They're showing sideline angles and the camera's shaking. Special. Next level. Props to all of them. It's fun. It's really good to be good at basketball. You're going to lose some games, especially in a year 1. But it's good to be good at basketball. And as South Carolina, as Kentucky gets going, the next home game is going to be really important for Ole Miss basketball. They lined up down the street. I mean, all the way down the street where they just wrapped around, went around the football stadium, people waiting in line to get into this basketball game. Tickets for the game were $600 for the center level and the secondary market. The fans did their job. I don't want to hear anything about the fans. Fans did their job. It was a lack of raising intensity that was the problem. And they will. They're going to get it done eventually. And a lot about this year is patchwork. And you can't have struggles from really good players. Ole Miss needed Jalen Murray to be elite tonight. He wasn't. And it's okay, because you can't be elite every night. You're going to have an off game. It was just a poor game for that to happen for Ole Miss and what they have going on. Just is what it is. Should be a lot of fun moving forward with Ole Miss basketball. I realize that everybody's kind of downtrodden at the moment. It's just a game. Willis says, random question, was Manning Day last year just for the opening of the renovated Manning Center, or is that going to be a yearly thing? I don't know. That one I don't know. James Hall says Juju will not have another game like he had tonight. I do not think so as well. To me, he is Ole Miss's best basketball player. And I don't think it's particularly close. But when you look at what this basketball team has, they play 8 to 9 players. They're not the deepest team in the world. They were down a player tonight, Rashad Marshall, who had 2 minutes in the game, but Ole Miss needed a little bit more from him. Austin Nunez, they needed a little bit more from him, just so the legs were there at the end of the ball game, and it just wasn't. It happens. It's not that big of a deal. Like I said, I do not think that Auburn is particularly good. I think they were pretty intense in the second half. And that crap that they did inside of a minute left in the game was ridiculous. The technical foul they got on a put-away dunk and all that's going to come back to bite you. I guarantee you that's going to come back to bite you. That always does. The cocky team generally doesn't win. Just doesn't. So we'll see exactly how Auburn progresses as the season goes on. Ole Miss is kind of done with them, except for maybe the SEC tournament. That they could be playing each other in the SEC basketball tournament. We'll see exactly how that goes. But like I said, they're a good basketball team. They're not a great basketball team. They're not. Honestly, I think Tennessee is a better basketball team than Auburn. I think Tennessee's a better basketball team than Kentucky. I think Alabama and Auburn are probably pretty close, but that's the SEC. Now, if you look at the next tier of the SEC, you have Ole Miss, you have Mississippi State, you have Florida, you have South Carolina at the moment, and that is where how many of them get into the NCAA basketball tournament are going to become major issues. So we'll see exactly how that goes. So let's see. To be fair, that's more than KD doing just doing his usual antics. To be fair, that's more, and it was unnecessary. It was a good basketball game, Jerry. It really was. It was a good basketball game. Those antics at the end of the game, that is a situation where if Ole Miss plays him again, I would watch out if he's in the air. That's all I'm saying. You don't do stuff like that. Jay Cannon says we're still a better team than we were last year. Oh, yes. Ole Miss won 3 SEC games last year. They weren't particularly good. I think there were 3-15 in the SEC. They won 13 games overall. So Ole Miss is an infinitely better basketball team. Jerry Rice says completely agree with you. Yeah, like I said, it was a good game. I mean, it is what it is. That just wasn't necessary. It just wasn't necessary at all, and it kind of ruined the opinion that I had going into the end of the ball game. So I'm like I said, I'm fine. Ole Miss is going to play South Carolina. That's going to be a very, very tough game. South Carolina beat Georgia tonight in Athens. They won some road games. They're going to be really, really difficult to deal with in Columbia. Columbia is one of those weird places for Ole Miss basketball. Even when South Carolina is not particularly good, that place is difficult for Ole Miss basketball. and Rupp on the weekend, next weekend. That's just look at the history books to figure out what's going on there. Now, Kentucky's always a really good team. And Ole Miss, if you just played on paper and it was on a neutral site and neither team had a Kentucky jersey on and just you were playing pickup, Ole Miss has a chance to be effective in that ball game. It's a game that Ole Miss can win. But I've seen Ole Miss go up to Rupp many, many times in games where I thought they had a chance to win, to where for whatever reason you look up and it's 25-3. I'm just expecting weirdness to happen over the course of the next week. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, so we're going to get out of here. This has been the instant overreaction. Auburn, let's see, what was this final score? A 91-77 win over Ole Miss. It was Ole Miss leading or a one-possession game for about 30 minutes of the game, and they just collapsed in the second half. And it just happens. Just happens. Anyway, I hope everybody has a good day. We'll talk about Cory Amos on the show Monday, the linebacker out of Louisiana that committed to Ole Miss. We'll talk a little bit more about this ball game. We will talk about maybe Coach Yo and her chance, her free shot at South Carolina. So I hope everybody has a good day. We'll see you then. Hotty toddy.